Just went to a sandwich shop on my lunch break. I had the hiccups while I was waiting in line when the guy before me turned around and asked me to stop hiccuping as it was distracting him from ordering. What is the most ridiculous request anyone has asked of you? I was at a water park when I was maybe 12 or 13 with some friends. I was walking up the stairs to one of the water slides and was obviously holding the handrail going up. I guess my hand was still wet from just getting out of the pool. Crazy, right? And the guy behind me on the stairs told me to quit holding the handrail. I was getting him wet. My friends and I thought he was joking with us, so we laughed. He gets pee and tells the 18-year-old lifeguard, who just quietly says, "I'm sorry, but it is a water park. You have to expect to get wet." I was at a water park when I was maybe 12 or 13. Oh, 12 please. I was on an airplane and the child in the seat behind me kept kicking the chair. I turned around and politely asked his father if he would keep him from kicking the chair, and the father told me, "You have to tell him yourself." Couple seconds of awkward staring. Then I looked at the child and asked him to stop. The kid did not stop. Worst flight. The dickheads you meet in life. This is one of their parents. I was using the restroom in a bar. The hand dryer was one of those super fancy, super loud Dysons that get your hands dried in about 3 seconds. There are a few other girls around the sink, talking and whatnot. As I walked to dry my hands in the super awesome loud thing, I noticed she was on her cell phone. As I stuck my hands in and it started, she tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I could wait for her to get off her phone call because it was loud and she couldn't hear her phone call. I walked out, wondering when restrooms had turned into phone booths. When I was about 16, I used to work for a movie theater in the pizza booth. Someone ordered 2 personal-sized pizzas, and as routine I gave back his change and said, "It will take about 5 or 6 minutes." He said, "Oh, 5 please," and walked away. I'll have to use that line. It's not douchey, it's just kind of funny. I was at the DMV, and there was a Chinese man that could not understand what a lady was saying to him. She saw me, I am Korean, and asked if I could translate for him. I said, "No, he is Chinese and I am Korean." She actually says, "Well, can't you speak Asian to him or something?" I was heating up a can of ravioli while I was deployed and it had a minute left and a guy behind me told me to hurry up. I looked at him and said, "It's not up to me how long this minute is going to take," and I kept staring at him. He stood in silence for the rest of the time until I grabbed my bowl out of the microwave and walked away. I'm time traveling as fast as I can, sir. When I was a kid, I was over at my buddy's house for dinner. We were goofing around and his dad yelled at him to shut his mouth and eat. When my buddy tried shoving steak up his nose, I lost it and my parents had to come get me. I had to read that twice, but it was worth it. I'd recently moved into a room in an apartment in Chicago. My room was the most insulated from the outside, and its window opened onto a sort of open area. I'd call it a courtyard, but nobody except the bottom floor apartment actually had access to it. Because of its location, it was pretty toasty in there during the summer fall months. There was no central AC. At the time, I hadn't purchased a fan yet, so my window was open. In the late evening, maybe 8ish 9ish, I had a pretty bad cold. You can probably see where this is going. One of the neighbors actually came to the door, knocked until someone answered it, and demanded that I stop coughing or close my window. I could see his apartment from my window, and happened to know that he had both fans and a window AC unit. So I asked why he couldn't close his window, since he was the one complaining. Well, he didn't feel he should have to. I said I didn't feel I should have to either, since I couldn't stop having a cold, and it was really freaking hot in my room, and unless he wanted to share a fan AC unit, he could close his own window. Never heard from the guy again. He was probably pissed that he learned so much about your perspective when he was so set on being mad. Not me, but my co-worker who worked the makeup counter at our store once politely asked a woman if she needed any help. The woman politely declined and asked to speak to her supervisor. When our supervisor showed up, the woman started screaming, and I mean screamed, about how she shouldn't be hounded by employees when she's trying to shop, and that my co-worker should be fired for essentially doing her job. Art Alice from retail wants to hear that story. My neighbors used to drink on the weekends and throw their beer cans over the fence into my backyard. It was annoying to have to pick the empty cans up all of the time, but I would recycle them and make a few dollars here and there. Well, one time during a rainstorm, one of the cans was partially under something, so when the rain would drip off of it, it would make a loud dink, dink sound. My neighbor came over late that night and complained about the constant dink sound emitting from my backyard and asked if I could go out and move the can so it wouldn't make the noise. I said something like, "You mean I should run out into the rain to move the empty can that you threw into my backyard because it is annoying you?" He nodded and said, yeah. I rolled my eyes, wished him a good night, and I shut the door. About an hour later, my dogs start barking and the can sound stops. I guess he couldn't stand the noise and jumped over the fence to move the can himself. The telltale can. A friend of mine is a cop, and he once arrested a guy. During the arrest, my friend gave the usual "you're under arrest," to which the guy replied, "No, I'm not." Caught my friend by surprise. Legally they have to let you go if you say that. I have a friend who has a very effective way of getting rid of hiccups. She stands up and cups her hands and put them under your mouth and simply says, "Hiccup in my hands." Obviously the person is quite confused and stares at her. After a few more times of saying "hiccup in my hands," she screams at the top of her lungs, "Just freaking do it." Problem solved. I'm slightly allergic to cats, and whenever I'm near one I get a little wheezy. Well, I guess this was too much for my friend when he told me to stop breathing because it's distracting him from his video game. I had a table once yell at me for asking how his meal is. He told me I was bugging him. Other than to drop off their drinks and food, that was the first time I was there to ask how everything is. Man, if one of my tables gives me sass, I shorten one of its legs so it wobbles. I was waiting for a bus the other day when a lady told me I had to stand at least 4 feet away from her because, as she put it, "I think you're dog crap." I thought she said I had stepped in dog crap or something, but she repeated herself enough that I caught the drift and moved away from her. It was weird, and it made me a little sad. She was probably mentally ill. They can be, involuntarily, belligerent bastards, some of them. I worked in the electronics department of a Walmart years ago. A customer asked me if we had a particular DVD player in stock. The shelf was empty, so I started to say, "I don't think we do, but if you'll wait right here I'll go check in the back." He stopped me mid-sentence and said, "I don't care what you think, I care what you know. Go check, mother sucker." So I went to the back and checked. Sure enough, we had a few in storage. Then I went to the break room, bought myself a can of Coke and kicked back for about 15 minutes. When I walked back on the floor he was still waiting. "Sorry, I checked. We're out of stock." I once had to explain to a table why their food was taking a while. We were very low on his meal, the grilled catfish. The old bastard told me I don't want to hear a story, just do what you're told. Oops, we're out of catfish. It's almost like you won't get your way if you antagonize the people you place yourself at the mercy of to get what you want. Used to work at Hallmark, and during Christmas season, a lady yelled at me for the 10th ornament in her series having blow paint on this specific part, not red like every other year. She also phrased it in such a way where it made it seem as though I was responsible for hand painting designing this piece of crap ornament. Ridiculous. Sometimes I have trouble breathing and have to take deep breaths in order to get enough air. My boss, who sits about 5 feet away, snapped at me and the following conversation ensued. Her, "Stop that." Me, "What?" Her, "You need to stop doing that, it's driving me crazy." Me, "You mean breathing?" Her, "Yes." To be fair, heavy breathers tend to freak most women out. The guy in line might have been trying to help cure your hiccups. It's a variation on a trick one of my high school teachers used to pull. She'd yell "stop hiccuping" and then make you get in front of the class and apologize. She'd then let you in on the joke by telling you that if you could hiccup in front of the class she'd give you $20. No one ever did. It worked every time. At my current apartment complex, there are no assigned parking spots and plenty of parking for everybody who lives there. I typically park in the same spot, creature of habit. But this one day my spot was taken, so I parked in the spot next to it. Other than those 2 spaces, every other space near my building was empty. 8 spaces. I get a knock on my door from the neighbor downstairs asking for me to move my car. I ask why and she said that it was her parking spot. I asked if we had assigned parking spots and she said no, but that's the one she always parks in. I told her I wouldn't move my car because she could park in the spot right next to mine and she would have to walk a full 3 steps further. She started getting agitated about it, so I just shut the door and went about my business. Well, she decided this wasn't okay and she parked directly behind me, basically blocking me in and blocking the empty spot beside me. At one point, her boyfriend came over and she actually moved her car so he could pull into the empty space and then moved it back. I knew it would be useless to ask her to move her car, so I just called the cops and let them deal with it. I can't even imagine the cop's face when she told him her excuse for parking directly behind me. Interesting. An hour ago, while waiting in line with my roommate at a convenience store close to my university, one of the girls from my university came up to me and asked me why I always wore my NYPD jacket. When I told her that it was my favorite one, she asked if I could please not wear it anymore as it bothered her. My roommate and I finally got to use a line we've been waiting to use for forever. Roomie and I started looking into our jacket pockets, bag, merchandise, etc. And when the girl gave me a confused face, I just said, "Sorry, I'm just looking for a frick to give. Personal holiday for us. 11/14 equals looking for a frick to give day." I was in the store with my kids. My baby, 20 months old, was just laughing. Not at something I was doing or anyone else, just random laughter. She's goofy like that, I guess. Some lady in front of me yelled me, telling me to make my baby stop laughing. I did the mature thing, tickled my baby to make her laugh even more and louder. I'm usually the houseman at the hotel where I work, but I was filling in for a receptionist. Anyway, I had just finished mopping the floor since there was no one else to do it. I put the yellow slippery floor sign down and a few minutes later, this 40-50-year-old woman walks in and slips. Couldn't you have waited until I was in my room to mop the floor? Oh, sorry mom. I don't put GPS trackers on our guests to know their exact location at all times and when they are most likely to come walking in with high heels. I was at a Redbox kiosk and I was waiting in line behind the person that was using the kiosk. Of course she happened to be one of those people that are nitpicky about it all. I started to get impatient and I was rocking back and forth. I was at least 3 feet behind her and all of a sudden she turned around and snaps at me in a really bitchy voice. "You need to take like 10 steps backwards because I don't want my identity stolen. Keep in mind you only really put your zip code in and that's really it." I chew with my mouth closed and I'm a quiet, polite eater, but my mom gets really annoyed if I'm eating something crunchy, like a cucumber for example. She hates hearing food be chewed. She asks me to stop chewing. I've had to leave the kitchen just to chew my food. I too hate the sound of food chewing, but I have the goddamn decency to treat it as my problem. I hate the sound of my own chewing. It's deep, and I can't pretend everyone but me is chewing wrong. I've had some pretty bad coughing fits for, the past year or so. They come and go, but when they happen it's like my lungs are telling me what the frick is all this air in here for? Out. Oh, you're having dry heaves? Too bad. This air is poison. I had one of them during one of my college classes and I stood up to excuse myself to the hall to catch my breath. "Prof, where are you going? You have a bottle of water at your desk. Please drink that instead of stepping out for a drink." I tried to protest, but when I opened my mouth, I just started violently coughing again. I went to my seat and, as a result of me trying to stifle my coughing, every 20 seconds I would cough really quietly or clear my throat, trying to hold back the impulse to hack out my trachea. A girl seated 2 seats down from me leans over and says, "Could you stop your dramatic act? It's really loud and some of us are here to learn." Well, I'd stop if I could. Princess, sorry if my pain causes you an annoyance. It's college. I would have just ignored the prof and went to the bathroom. You don't need fricking permission to leave. I worked at a high-end bar and this rich middle-aged white woman walked in. The sun was shining as it was like 5 p.m. and reflected off the bar. She immediately said, "My god, can you people turn that light down?" I looked at her and said, "You want me to turn down the sun?" She said, "Do you have a problem with that? I'm the customer." Sigh. We had a small sink in our dorm room when I was a freshman in college. My roommate kept odd hours and on this particular occasion went to bed before I did. Just as she got into bed, I got up to brush my teeth and wash my face. It was dark, save for the light over the sink. At this point, I have soap on my face. "Could you go do that in the showers down the hall? You're disturbing my sleep right now." "Oh, I'm almost done. I just need to rinse off this soap." "Well, I'm trying to go to sleep." "I know. I'm almost done. Promise. I'm not going to ask you again." Well, if you hadn't stopped me to complain so many times, I'd be done washing my face by now. That, among many other reasons, led to me moving out while she was asleep one day. I used to work at a clothing store. My manager once had Spanish-speaking customer that didn't know a word of English. My manager didn't speak Spanish, so she was struggling to understand what he was asking for. My manager then turns to me and asks, "Do you speak Spanish?" I answered no. She then shakes her head and lets out a very annoyed sigh. She then said, "I really need all of my employees to know Spanish for situations like this." I just raised an eyebrow at her and watched her struggle with the customer until she found another customer that spoke Spanish and was able to help. After all that, my manager promptly reminded me that if I wanted to be kept, I was seasonal. Then I should learn basic Spanish. I told her to go learn Spanish herself since she clearly doesn't know it either. She then explained that she doesn't have to because she usually doesn't deal with the customers as much as the cashiers. After that, I just finished up my shift and never came back. Best revenge would have been to learn Spanish later on and come back and ask for assistance in Spanish as a customer. My friend was asked to cover up her freckles to look more like the other bridesmaids. She has a lot of freckles all over her body. I was with my girlfriend at a supermarket behind this family. I'm chatting with her, not loud or anything, and this kid couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 turns around and shushes me. You know, the whole single finger in front of lips shush. I stare at him with all of my 6 foot, 280 pounds, bearded glory, and he turned around and hid his face. I wasn't mad or anything, just seemed like a good response. It was wonderful. As bad a habit as it is, I smoke. But when I do it in public, I try to be polite and find a spot out of the way so I don't bother anybody else with it. I'll usually go out in a parking lot or behind a building away from busy areas so it doesn't bother kids or other people minding their business. A few months ago I was outside by myself waiting for a ride when a guy walks up and sits close by. I was almost done with the cigarette, so I had been sitting there for 5 minutes or so. When I take a drag and blow out the smoke, the guy looks at me and says with a really snotty tone, "Can you not do that near me?" His sudden rudeness caught me off guard, so I just stared at him for a moment. Normally I wouldn't care to move, but considering there was a bench on the sidewalk nearby and that I was behind the building just to avoid people like him, I said no and finished. He didn't even smoke or do anything while he was there. He just had a pissy look on his face. As soon as I put the cigarette out, he walked off. It seemed like he stood there on purpose just to be a dong. This has 2 parts to give. Part 2. The main ridiculous request. Context. 1. My boss telling me to not ever get sick ever again or else I would get fired. Along with on the job asking me to just do things that weren't actually possibly logical to do. 2. A few months after I resigned from the company, former Mr. Boss emails me and asked me if I could change my LinkedIn account to say that I still work there so that this company could still qualify for a certain type of professional designation. They didn't have enough people to actually qualify for said designation, which is crucial to the operations of the company. I shook my head when I read that email. Not exactly a request, more of a demand. I was a passenger in a car stopped at a red light when the car next to us got rear-ended. It was launched into the middle of the intersection as the car that hit it took off. We pulled right over to help the woman that got hit. As my buddy and I are standing there trying to help her and calling 911, all other drivers that are trying to go through the intersection are honking and aggressively motioning us to move out of the way. No one else stopped to help and we were all just in their way. My faith in humanity took a major hit that day. I don't understand why people yell at other people to tell them to stop crying. No matter what the reason, people just seem to think that the way to make crying stop is to yell at the person to stop. I've noticed this method is even more ineffective on children. Happened to me at the movies. I was eating a large bag of Skittles as quiet as I could, and the lady in front of me turned around and said, "Be quiet." I really was eating at a standard movie eating decibel level. Since she was rude about it, I smashed my hand into the bag, making the loudest noises for the next couple of handfuls. This is one time when those loud Sun Chips bags would have been useful. A customer came up to me and started ordering in Arabic. I unfortunately don't speak Arabic, so when I looked confused, she asked to speak to my manager. She then yelled at her why she hired people that couldn't speak Arabic, considering it's a Middle Eastern bakery in suburban Melbourne. I was told by a customer to learn Arabic or she would never come back to the store. When customers are a pain in the butt about something stupid, and then say something like, "Well, I'm going to take my business elsewhere," it is so hard to not reply with, "That's the freaking best news I've heard all day." I had bronchitis a couple of years ago and had the horrible hacking cough that accompanies it. A couple of my friends picked me up from my friend's house and dropped me off at my house. It was a 7-minute car ride. One of my friends who was in the car asked me to stop coughing, it was giving him a headache. Once, when I was a kid, the family was getting ready to leave for some big road trip. My mother was rushing around trying to get everything ready, and she asks my father if there's anything else we need to remember to do. He says we should all make sure to use the bathroom before we go, because it's a long drive. My mother replies, "I don't have time. Can you do that for me?" The correct answer is sure, and then when she needs to pee during the trip, kindly explain that you did as she asked. You've got it covered. Red box is always great for douche nozzles. I was looking at the movies and had just picked one when this girl came up behind me and asked if I would let her go ahead and return her stuff. I politely told her I was in the middle of my purchase and would be done soon enough. She got all huffy and complained to the air that some people could be so inconsiderate. I was at my job, Tavanna, and I was standing close to one of the samples because I was talking to a customer about the teas and how to brew them and blah blah blah. And this guy, probably in his mid-30s, walks up behind me and says, "Move out of my way. I want to try this sample." I did not know what to say, so I just moved out of the way without hesitation. One of my co-workers saw and we agreed he was very rude. I have Tourette's syndrome, and once one of my tics were happening. Then some guy turns around and says, "Shut up." I tell him I have Tourette's and that I can't stop it because it's a habit. He then says, "Well, inhabit it." Should have inhabited his face with your fist. I used to work for a gaming store, answering phones, working the register, etc. One day I got a phone call asking for my manager, to which I quickly complied. Apparently, according to my boss, this customer called in to complain that I was too happy and that I needed to stop being so perky when processing transactions. And this lady was completely serious in her complaint. My manager told me all he could say was that he would reprimand me for being too happy, but that he couldn't make any guarantees. No idea whether or not she ever had a follow-up complaint. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.